Okay, welcome to Vantage Point Conversation. So, welcome to my audience. Welcome to those also watching on the replay. So, my guest today is Laura Topor. Topor? I haven't
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
pronounced it yet.
that's right.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Very
Yes.
good. So, my opening monologue remains the same always. I don't introduce my guests. I don't. Some people think that's laziness, but it's actually, I don't think I would do a very good job. I think it's much better that I ask you just to give an introduction of yourself. Take as long or little time as you like. What you think, maybe highlights, lowlights, anything, any context you think you would like the audience to know about you.
Yeah, definitely. I understand why you're not introducing other people. I think it's pretty hard to make an intro for ourselves, let alone for someone else. But yeah, if I were to sum up what I'm doing in a sentence, I would say I'm a builder of human-centered foundations. I've been working with people for more than 15 years now, in different capacities, so in training, HR, coaching, and this is the space where I feel the most comfortable. Um, I like to say that I thrive in what I call the 0 to 1 phase. So if you know that point in a startup where I don't know, communication starts to break and things no longer work because you don't have foundations in place. So that's where I come in. That's my playground. I like to step into that messy middle, so to speak, and create a structure, foundations from, I don't know, diagnosis if it's necessary, to workflows, to handbooks, systems. But actually, what I like the most is building and nurturing relationships. Um, I like helping professionals, leaders, but also like other professionals, to really deal with transitions, to deal with conflict, to deal with identity shifts. So many of these things that we are going through ourselves, um, and building relationships with their team, working on the culture. This is actually the space that I like the most. So yeah, that would be me.
Nice. You said so much in there that I'd like to sort of not take apart, but sort of dig into. I think the lovely thing is that you said that's your playground, and I love that because a lot of people think about work in the exact opposite. It's like a prison. It's really like, oh, it's really horrible. I don't enjoy it, etc. But it's lovely that you've found your space, you found your area, and like you said, 0 to 1, where you sort of come alive. And I was just wondering, did you always know that about yourself? Are you self-aware enough to sort of say that's where you thrive and where you enjoy it, or did that come through practice and learning, and did you try other things and they not work out quite as well? How was it for you?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of trial and error or digging. I had my time back in the corporate environment where, you know, how it is in a big corporation, you get to do a slice of the pizza, like just that slice over and over again, the
Yeah,
same processes, the same things. And I realized that's not a space for me. I need a little bit more space, more exploration. I need to be able to be a bit more creative. Although I do like structure and I have an analytical approach and an analytical mind, I also, on the other hand, need a little bit of creativity, of space, of freedom, you know, to explore, to do other things. So, yeah, I think it came with this trial and error.
yeah. I so I the reason, excuse me, that I want to have this conversation is because I often say it's for selfish reasons, but um, I I'm quite interested in people in general, in all different types of people, so I can expand my learning, just see what's going on, and sort of question my own thinking sometimes. But I've also been very fascinated about business. Someone once said to me that most people have a product and then build a business around it. But this person said to me, you actually want to have a business and build a product around that, and which is actually true. But I'm very fascinated in the dynamics, and I think, like most things, we try to put things in a box, and I don't think things actually always fit in a box. I think we can sort of generalize in certain ways. And one of the things that you just said, that you like being creative, but you're very structured, and almost those things, when it goes into the corporate world, they're almost two different things. And so the creative side would be maybe marketing, or doing something more, if I say unstructured, where you have to think and test and try. And the structured, I would say, is like daily operations that are consistent and don't change. And what I've actually, I started floating this idea a couple of times in conversations. No one's said anything otherwise, but I would love companies to think differently about how they employ people, because we have these roles and responsibilities, and they're very rigid a lot of the time. They're like I just said, right? You're in operations. You just do that. That's your job. You do that 5 days a week. You know, 52 weeks a year, given holiday, etc. And which is fine maybe in the beginning, but I think people get bored. There are some people that just absolutely love that. They that is where they shine, and that is absolutely fine. But I think there is this this space where people want a bit of both. And always give this example. So I don't necessarily like labels, but it's easier maybe for people to understand in this context. So introverted and extroverted. So you would assume maybe someone in sales has to be a bit extroverted, speak to clients, talk, etc. Now, I found myself being extroverted at times. I can pull into that moment when I need to. I can be on stage. I can talk in front of people, and switch my insecurities off for a moment and just talk. But what happens is I can do that for a limited time, and then I have to go back into my little shell and just be by myself, and just not have to talk. And then, so I was thinking, I've said this before, if you had a job, most people would say, right, okay, you've got sales, and you go, okay, maybe I could do that for like 3 days a week. And then 2 days a week, I want to be a bit more introverted. Maybe you want to be in the back office, in like the development side, or like coding or something, where you can just put some headset on and solve some problems. And but that's not how most companies are structured, or at least that's not how they sort of do job descriptions and roles. But I think it's really good. And I believe that we miss from all of that is that if you had someone that worked in sales, could really understand what the client wants in those conversations, but they get that motivation to talk, and they express themselves, and they use their energy on that. And then for the other 2 days, they can go and start developing stuff. And actually, that's a huge connection between, okay, I actually know what the clients want, and then I could go and develop it, or understand why it's possible, why it's not possible. Because oftentimes, when I look at companies, these two departments are separate, generally don't talk to each other. If they do, they're saying things differently, and actually it would be of a huge benefit. And I love the fact that the way that you bring your job, the way you think about things, you've almost designed it that way. Was it intentional, or again, did you fall into that? And how do you separate those things? Do you do it by day? Do you do it like half day, couple of hours here, there? How do you think about it?
I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but early in my career, I started working as a language trainer. And like you say, I worked with a lot of people. I had to give classes in front of, I don't know, even 10 plus people, 15 people. And that was something I had never thought I would be able to do ever in my life, because I considered myself an introvert. But I got into that space and I started to enjoy it. And I said, okay, so I like doing this. Of course, it was not 8 hours a day. It was like limited amount of time. but I always left those classes energized and with such a good disposition. And I said, okay, so I like working with people. It's just that I felt the need to bring my impact a little bit to a different level, because helping someone to learn a language is useful, is nice, but I felt that I could have a little of bigger impact on people. So that's why I went into the HR field. Um, and then later also I did my training in coaching. Um, and at the moment, yeah, I think I have a good balance. There are days when maybe I get to do a little more of the analytical or structured or yeah, tasks. Um, but I have, I would say, enough freedom to plan the activities out. And I can plan also conversations with team members, so I can balance how many of those conversations I have, or interviews or things like that. I have right now the flexibility and the freedom to plan these things out, and I love the mixture. Yeah, it's definitely something that I enjoy.
Yeah. I was thinking as you were saying that, I mean, we haven't. I know we've got your title up there, and you're a freelancer, but um, from our last conversation, so you actually you worked in a company before, and then you started creating your own company as a freelancer, and you did that on the side. And again, this we said this isn't about everyone should do this, but I think there's this. I have this all or nothing thinking. That's how I, I that's generally the way that I think. And so I've been through therapy and things like that. And people said, "Oh, you're quite all or nothing thinking." And I'm trying to when that comes up, I'm not always aware of it. I think, okay, it's got to be this or it's got to be that. And then if someone can tell me, okay, that's you're thinking just in very rigid terms, I go, oh yeah, and I always say that there's this beautiful space in between these two extremes, and whatever that is, and oftentimes the solution to whatever it is that we want exists in there. Because if we're too hard, or we say, right, it's got to be that way, it's got to be that way, um, it really limits our thinking, certainly for me. And then when you actually bring those thoughts down and you go, oh, what could be something in between? And so when we had our chat before for last week, before agreeing to do the live, you explained that actually you were working at one point and then you started to do the freelance thing on the side. Could you just take a moment and explain what you did and how you did it? And it actually moved a bit quicker than I was expecting. I thought you'd been doing it for years, but it was a bit quicker. So just just take a moment and just explain how that works for you.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, that thing with running from something and running towards something, I think at that moment I was running from something. I wanted to have a little bit more freedom, um, maybe to be my own boss. That was something that I enjoyed at that time, because I was not quite happy with the bosses that I had, the leaders that I worked with. So it came from that tendency of running from a little bit. And I just wanted to have more flexibility in general, and being able to maybe work from different places. My husband has to travel a lot with his job, so it helps me to be able to go with him sometimes. And um, I was thinking, how can I do it in such a way that I get this flexibility and I still have like meaningful work. And yeah, I came up with this idea of doing freelancing on the side at the moment, at the beginning. I think it was the moment when I first found out about Upwork. It's this platform where you can find a lot of remote jobs. And for a couple of months, I did it in parallel with my corporate job. And I cannot say that it was the perfect contracts that I had or the most stable relationship. It was just something ongoing. And then at a certain point, I think it was also that, how people call it, the leap of faith. Okay, now it's time. Let me do the change. Let me quit the job. and just focus on freelancing. I think for me, this transition took some months. I'm not exactly sure now if 3 or 4 or 5, something like, but something somewhere around this number. And the interesting thing, and I have to laugh when I realized this, because I was thinking also about how things happen to me. And the, let's say, most meaningful or biggest contracts that I got on Upwork were in moments when it was not about my effort. It was just the right time for something to happen, just that I was ready for that, relationship to start, or for that engagement to begin. Because I'm also the type that I'm like putting in a lot of effort. I can, when I'm doing something, I'm very committed. I can, bring all that energy, all that time. And it just proved to me that sometimes it's not about the effort, that some things come at the right time when you're ready for them.
Mm.
Um, and it just so happened in my case, and I'm still, processing that that lesson. It was actually, yeah, very, very nice reflection.
Yeah, it's I really like that because yeah, I'm a big consumer of YouTube gurus, and they tell you how to work and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I've tried to create businesses in the past, and I feel a bit ashamed to actually say I've tried to create businesses because it didn't. I never took any money. No one ever bought anything from me, or I never sold anything. I had the aspirations for sure, but it never worked that way. But the challenge with a lot of social media, it all sounds very good, and there's always a framework, there's always a system, to buy into, and I get that. But oftentimes, the people that are explaining that have a different mentality, have a different personality, and the way that they approach things are very different. And when I followed those, I found it I found it quite exciting and exhilarating within like maybe the first couple of weeks or months, with the idea and hope that everything just takes off and you're a huge success. And I would put everything else aside. So not in a nasty way, but I'd go, right, okay, I've got to put the time in. I've got to work longer hours. I've got to wake up early. I've got to do this. Got to do this. And uh, and then I realized that actually their way is not my way. And I more recently I found doing these lives, it came out of something really out of frustration. I was stuck for a while. I've been let go of my job. I was trying to create a consultancy business to help leaders connect with their people, and no one was buying what I was selling. I don't know if that's they weren't interested or the way I was selling it or speaking about it. I'm not sure. And so then at the time I was doing this marketing course, and one of the things they advised was to do these LinkedIn lives. They said a way to get people's not attention necessarily, but to build trust was to go live once a week at the same time, around half an hour, and effectively give some value. Show them how you do your service, product, or whatever it is. Sometimes invite a guest on. They can speak about something that you don't know enough, and you cannot know enough about, or it's attached to what you do, but they can explain it a bit more. And so I basically, in that course, there was a girl who was also there, and she was a bit nervous about being on camera. And I said, well, that's fine. Let me just do it for half an hour. We'll do like an interview. And so we did it. And at the end of it, she loved it. And but it was very easy for me to do. And so at that time, I was still thinking about this consultancy work, and that wasn't taking off. And I just got so frustrated. I was like, do you know what? For the next year, I'm just going to do 2 LinkedIn lives a week for a year. I didn't know how that was going to work. Didn't know if I could even get one guest to sign up for it. But the strange thing is, everything moved quicker. I I took all the other stuff, all the marketing funnels, thought of websites, logos, everything. I was still posting content on a daily basis because I quite enjoy that. I quite like the thinking of how, processing what something's happened to me or how I see something and putting that down into words. And I thought that might be useful for people. Also, for people to be aware of me and they go, oh, it's nice that then they start to see me more regularly. But if I look back and compare every time how I've tried all of these other businesses, I was really trying too hard, really, really pushing. And now it feels that I'm not even trying. That feels um, so easy. And I find that a little bit scary. I'm very grateful for it, but then something in my mind says, "Well, this isn't really work, is it, Colin? It's just you're just having fun." And I was like, "No, that's how it should be." And because I think I don't force anyone to have these conversations, I just ask and I build relationships. If someone wants to do a live, absolutely. If they don't, absolutely fine. Either way, and I'm grateful for the connection and the conversations that I've had. And then I get to have these amazing conversations, and I go, "Well, that's easy." And it's strange, that paradox, and because it's easier, I do more of it, and I'm excited to do it that way. Is that how you feel about it? Is it slightly different for you?
Yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about, and I can, yeah, definitely resonate. I think when we find ourselves in our work, or when our work aligns with ourselves, um, it comes from inside, and then it's sort of not work anymore. It comes easier. It's enjoyment. It's yeah, something you like doing. And also the part with building relationships with people. I think in this moment that we live, and so many professionals offer so many services, and there are so many specialists out there, I guess it's probably what makes the difference. Being able to create a relationship with someone, giving them the option to, continue if they want, or withdraw if they don't want, but having different touching points over time, and just continuing to nurture that relationship. I definitely, yeah, think it's the best way to do it. And it's like obvious when you're talking about this. I can see your passion, your enthusiasm, your lies, your eyes light up. It's definitely, yeah, I'm very happy that you found this activity that brings pleasure. And I think it's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
When work aligns with us, magic happens.
yeah, yeah. And in terms of so I always wanted a work where I wasn't tied to one place. And so I have two young kids. I'm divorced, so I'm a co-parent. Um, but so I live in Luxembourg, but I'm from the UK. And I always said when I came to Luxembourg that I wanted the freedom to go back to the UK whenever I wanted, not to necessarily stay, um, but to go and see my family and just um, be that way, and just sort of say, right, I've got the freedom. If this month I want to go, fine. If next month I don't, or there's something else going on. But when I found that I worked for companies, and I understand the purpose, but I think it did change during COVID. There was this, you had to be in the office, and that if you weren't, there were a lot of rules in place. And so in the UK, before I moved to Luxembourg, they were quite open-minded about remote working. I was working 2 days a week from home, and then I moved to Luxembourg, and the concept of remote working really didn't work very well. It was only reserved for like managers or executives, and it was. it was hard for me to go from having a bit of freedom and flexibility over my life to being in the office 5 days a week, and then being told that I couldn't go somewhere, and it felt very like I was being held on to, and that was difficult. I understand partly why it's done that way. And in Luxembourg, it's quite you have to be a bit careful of like tax implications where you're working from.
Mm.
You know, and if you worked from another country, you have to pay tax in that country, and it makes it more harder for the company that's employing you. So there's a few restrictions around that. But then when COVID hit, and I know COVID was a very special example, but all of those rules, all those barriers that companies, or I want to say excuses that the companies said, no, you can't do this, suddenly fell away. And I was like, oh, okay. And I think the surprising part for me or for the world was that everyone thought that productivity, would go down, but it actually went up. And this is again something that I believe for myself. People think that when they're working from their home or something like that, they're pretending to work, and they're not actually efficient or effective. Now, um, I I started to understand that I have different energy at different times during the day. Morning seems a bit more uh, high energy. Afternoon is a bit lower energy. Now, when you go into the office, you're constantly being watched, whether you think you are or not, or people are always seeing you, and so you can't actually be the way that you want to be because you're being paid to be there for a certain amount of time. Um, but with COVID, when you're working from home, you can manage your energy and focus on things that you want to. Um, and people go, oh, well, you're just going to put the washing on or do something like that. And people were a bit like, feel ashamed of saying that. But I go, yeah, that's fine. But it takes 10, 15 minutes to go and put the washing on, not even that. And it's a break. I can go away from my computer. I can go and put the washing on. And then my brain's not worrying about that. If I was in the office, I'd be like, oh yeah, when I go home, I've got to put the washing on. I've got to do that. But that 15-minute break is probably very good for you because you go and put the washing on and you'll think about a problem maybe differently rather than just sitting in front of the computer. And so we always think these things are negative. And but actually I think it was a real positive, and people could work the way they wanted to work. That's at least my interpretation. I'd be interested to hear yours. I'll just finish off my big speech. But I found this lifestyle for me. I've created these lives. It's currently not business. I'm looking into options of creating a way of generating income. But the freedom and flexibility I have. So I'm going to the UK tomorrow afternoon. I can schedule my work. I've got another live tomorrow morning. I can take my laptop. I can work the rest of the week, or I cannot. That's my choice. I know the impact on me, and I can make my own decisions about how I work when I work. Sometimes that might not be the most convenient, but I can trade it for something else, as in, okay, I can go and pick my kids up from school, no problem. Okay, but maybe when they get home, then I just have to do another half hour. But everything was almost designed around, the work is kind of designed around what I really wanted from work. And I guess you've kind of built the same thing. And we often do it the other way around. We say, right, okay, this is our work, these are the hours, this is what I'm going to do, and then everything fits around it. But I already knew in my mind how I wanted to work, and then I've built in. I had help. I had a coach at the time. I built the foundations of the things that I want to do. Exercise. I do breath work. I block off time when I'm going to pick up the kids. Any doctor's appointments, etc. And then work miraculously fits beautifully around that. And I'm like, that absolutely is amazing. And I think people would be a lot happier if they could do that, even if they worked for offices and companies would allow that. So I've spoken for a long time, apologies.
Mm.
But
No, no.
what's your take? What was your experience? Do you see the same thing? Am I just being thinking about my way of working? What's your take on the whole thing?
Yeah, no, definitely. As I already mentioned, I also appreciate the freedom and the flexibility. For instance, I'm not a morning person, so I find it a little bit hard to start very early in the morning. I would rather go later in the evening, but I like to have my morning time, which sometimes is possible, sometimes not. Of course, I'm like adaptive. I'm also very flexible, but having a or building. A work that fits around life, like you're saying, has a lot of benefits. And I think for me, at least, this is normality, or this should be normality, not the other way around. For instance, I'm a type of person that I like to dig into a lot of things. I never liked to work 8, 9 hours a day. I need a shorter time to work because I also do other things. I like to learn a lot. I like to study. I also have a household that I need to take care of. I'm a woman, so I need to, put all my responsibilities together and bring them all together. And a shorter work schedule works for me. So I've always tried um, to create this work that fits actually the life. And I remember the beginning of my career here in the city, when I went to interviews and I was asking for part-time jobs, if it's possible, 6 hours, and everyone was, wow, looking at me as if it was something outrageous. They've never heard of, what do you mean part-time? What are you doing with the rest of the time? Well, I have many things to do, but yeah, I think, like I said, the pandemic kind of forced people into it. They just overnight found themselves in the situation that they have to do it. But what is not maybe settled is the trust, because when you have trust in people, I think you are able to offer them this flexibility, as long as the targets are hit, the achievements are there to work whenever it suits them best. But I think it is a big connection with trust. And I see that in a lot of places, this element is a little bit maybe missing. The maybe controlling part takes over a bit, and we want to, or we think that people are more effective if we have control, or we have better results if we have control. But actually, that's not the case. I see that people are much more motivated when they are shown trust and they are given this flexibility and this option to choose how they do their best work, when they do their best work, as long as, of course, the results are there.
Yeah, it's that that whole idea of focus on the result rather than the process. And I honestly, I do my best work when I'm left alone to go and work it out. Um, I I always deliver. I would suggest that's in my mind. I do, and how I get there, and I'm one of those people that used to leave things till the last minute. I think I still do, but that works for me as long as I can give myself enough time rather than sort of give myself sort of a heart attack right at the last minute. But well, I always found as well, we have this understanding that basically we work in an office for, let's say, 7, 8 hours a day. The reality is it's often much more than that. And work just expands to fit into those like parameters. And I would be in the afternoon, just say you've been out to lunch or something in the afternoon, you're not productive, you're not doing anything, you feel a bit, and I know in some cultures it's okay to fall asleep at work, especially Asia, and but in Europe, that's, that's almost like a sackable offence. But when you sometimes you don't need like a deep sleep. You just need like a nap of like 10 minutes or something, or your energy's drained, or say you did something very energy intensive in the morning. You were focused really on delivering something, and then your energy is really low and you just need to take a break. And but that seems that that's just not okay. So there's a whole load of things. I think energy, understanding how we are, like you said, you're not necessarily a morning person. Maybe you could just shift by a couple of hours, but the results get done, and they actually get done better because when you're in the office, it's you're just sort of pretending you're trying to fit in, and everyone's trying to do the same thing. And I've often found there's sort of some strange games. Everyone's pointing out what everyone else is doing and stuff like that. It's like, well, they're not doing that. They're not being. And you go, well, just let everybody do it. As long as if we can find a way to work together. If I can do something in half the time and I can just focus, and the result is the thing that you want, and I can do my bit. If you leave me alone, I can do that, and I can manage my time and manage my coffee intake or whatever it is, then I get it done. And then maybe someone else wants to check that work, but they take a bit longer, and that's fine. The result is the result, and we're not always equal. And just because you can do something in half the time that I can doesn't make your side or my side any different. We get paid for the result, and that might be that you're much more experienced or you're great at that one thing, but we always have this comparison thing. But for me, we focus too much on the process. I think I think looking at a process, I love making things more efficient. That's like it's pleasure for me. But I think you have to do the process. You have to try it and trust it and see what's working. And then every once in a while, look at it and see, well, where's there, some waste that we don't actually need to do. Sending a report that we used to send for clients 6 years ago, that client left 3 years ago, like we don't need to send it anymore. But I think trusting, like you said, in people that they can do it in their way. But we seem to force the results that we want, but we also force the process that we want it done by. And I know there's rules and regulations, but I often think that has nothing to do with forcing. And like you said, the word control, I think that's a big aspect of it. And I think if we could just trust more, let go of the control, and again, I would imagine that's a big part of your work. How you sort of explain that to people. But it would be a lot easier just if you can just, because if you're trying to control everything, especially in a work environment, that's just endless stress. You might feel this dopamine that yes, yeah, everything got done, but I feel that it's an illusion that you've got control over everything, and you just, that's a never-ending road to stress. Is that how you see things?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think a lot of it comes from maybe, or part of it comes from treating something urgent that it's actually not, or it becomes urgent because something important along the way got neglected or ignored. Or so I see a lot of times that when we don't focus on doing the important things, then they become urgencies, and then we need to take care of them in that moment. But all of this can be avoided if we start to define urgency better, and we look at what is real urgency and what can be, prevented or avoided a lot of the times.
Yeah, that's well, as you were saying that, I was thinking, yeah, that's so amazing way to think about things. And then I was thinking, it must be great to have you in the company because I know you work with maybe one client at a time, maybe two at most, but the fact that you're not there constantly, and I found this when I actually didn't go to the office in any company that I worked at. I was able to come with a different perspective and almost but when you're doing the work, you're so close to it that you can't see those things. You just go, yeah, that got missed, so now that becomes urgent. But whereas, in the example you just mentioned, you come in and not in a critical way, but just go, oh, hang on a second, let's just take a moment. Is that really urgent, or was that just we didn't classify it, or we didn't give it as enough attention earlier on in the process, so it became something that seemed urgent? And that benefit of that different perspective from someone that's not caught in the day to day, that's huge for companies, right? Because as you say, if you've classified that as urgent, and it doesn't need to be, and if you're not careful, everything becomes urgent, and so there is nothing that's urgent, and I think companies miss that. And I remember going into one of the companies I worked at, and there was a bit of tension in the office, and they were talking about stuff, and I walked in, and I was like, and they all sort of started saying, oh, this is this, and it was, I don't know how, it just looked like I was looking at a picture, and I was like, yeah, but you're all talking about this thing up here is really the thing that we should focus on. And it was really odd to me, and I was like, I don't think companies understand the benefit of having someone that comes in and can just, honestly, I saw it within 2 minutes. And you go, oh, should we look at this? And then we did. And all of this problems, all this, I'd say, conflict or bickering or went away. And I was like, oh. And I was like, that in itself is worth so much value, whether you want to put a monetary value on it. Because if I'd have come in and just joined that conversation and get to it would just, it's a waste of people's time. So I think it's great that you have people like you doing that, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's why I also like when I start working with a new client to start with a sort of diagnosis, as you're saying, not to just bring to the surface the things that are not working, but just to understand, to have the bigger picture of what is going on, what is the root cause, what are just the symptoms, and how we can get to gradually work on the root cause. I think that's an important piece of the work. And yeah, it requires a lot of, let's say, open-mindedness and maybe also humility from the leaders to be able to look at that report that I'm giving at the end, because I'm a person that is very tactful, and I like to, I'm very careful when I say things, but some of the things need to be told also in a more direct way. So yeah, it takes a lot of courage for someone to, and I'm doing always my reports in a very balanced way. So I always have the positive sides, the sides that can be improved. It's not only leaning on the, improvement side. But I can appreciate that it takes a lot of courage and humility for a leader to be able to look at such a report and to actually have those moments of self-reflection, self-awareness, to understand, okay, maybe there are some points here that are worth considering.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, you know, to your point, it takes, it takes that moment of reflection. And I think oftentimes, we're 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 going down a hill and we're going so fast, and then someone else comes in and sort of says, no, 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 let's just take a pause for a moment and look, are we going down the right hill, or are we going to the right thing? And that, especially when you've got pressure, deadlines, that can feel very like, oh no, hang on, this person's trying to stop me doing the thing that I need to. And that, like you say, takes a lot of trust, humility, just to sort of say, oh, it's not about pointing out things that are wrong. I've often heard this, that the people doing the job, they know how to do it better. They're just, there's people getting in the way, there's meetings that don't need to happen, etc. And I've often found that as leaders, as managers, our job is not so much to sort of dictate what needs to be done. It's to actually clear the path so that people can do the work and they can enjoy it and they can try things out. And so a big thing in my life has been about experimenting. Um, Again, because I lived in this world of extremes, it was like pass, fail, worked or it didn't work. And in a way to kind of cheat my mind of thinking this way, I came across this guy, Joe Hudson, in the US, and he talks about experimenting. And I absolutely love that because experimenting is just trying and then looking at your results and saying, okay, did that work? And it might be that it did work, but you just need to tweak it and it would get better. Or you go, no, I did this for 6 weeks and this was the outcome, etc. And it wasn't a failure, it was just a discovery of, okay, we're attempting that. It's either not the right time or it doesn't work, we don't have the resource, or it doesn't align to what we're doing. But you've kind of capped your downside, the impact. And I think if more companies allowed their teams to experiment with some sort of boundaries, I think they would be, it would take a little while for them to have that trust in themselves, but that builds confidence to try something and not feel that they're going to get punished for something being not working. And it's just like, yeah, I did this and this is the results. And they go, oh, okay, that's cool. And at least you've tried. And for me, it sort of it opens up my mind to at least trying something and just going, okay. And then I build confidence from that and go, oh, okay, I try it, didn't work, that's okay. No downsides, wasn't a failure, it was my learning. And what did I learn about myself and the environment that doesn't make sense? And I found experimenting hugely beneficial to my work, to myself, to my confidence. And I would really like more companies to do it, but I think there is this misunderstanding that it's a cost and that it's a waste of time. I actually think it's the exact opposite.
Very interesting perspective. Yeah, it's very nice, and I think it ties in also with this concept of psychological safety, where people are allowed to make mistakes and no one will retaliate. Like there will not be any consequences. And of course, I understand there are some environments in which mistakes can cost, maybe. But I was reading recently Amy Edmondson's book around the psychological safety, and she was giving the examples of people working in hospitals. So I guess that's the most, critical field where you're really not allowed to make mistakes because it's people's lives at stake. And if in that environment it helps to be able to not to make mistakes, because everyone makes them, but to feel safe enough to report them and to help everyone else to learn from them. If in that field it's possible, I guess the other fields, it's much more easier in the other fields. So I think it ties in together, and it's a matter of perspective, of mentality, again, of the leadership. And I think another thing that helps and that maybe not a lot of people think about is probably having, we go back now to the beginning of our discussion, having a life outside of work, because I see how the environments are when people from morning until evening, they are just focusing on work and there's nothing else in their life. You can see that that's all what there is. The atmosphere, the energy that they create, the expectations they have from people, it's like totally different when someone also has other priorities and has a life outside of work. I see a totally different energy.
Yeah. And you see that energy transfer back into work as well?
Definitely.
Yeah. That's super interesting, right? I think, yeah, I don't know, somewhere we got confused that and I had the same thing that when because I was employed and I was being paid a salary, that I almost gave my whole self to the company, and whatever was asked, I did. And and I don't know if that was always the way or it's my interpretation, but when I do stuff for myself, and so you know we talked about designing your life. I work out 5 days a week. Not every week that works, but um, now that takes time out of replying to messages and doing other things, but it's booked into my calendar, and I know it's going to be done. It's not even a habit; it's just a routine that just gets done. But I know after that, my energy. So if I was to reply to a message without doing the workout, and then reply to the same message after I've done a workout, you're going to get a much positive, more positive response after I've done my workout. I think obviously, working out and has physical but also mental benefits as well. Um, but yeah, we don't really see how that transfers. It almost looks like, oh, well, you're doing something for yourself, but like you said, it transfers back to the work. Like it's such a simple thing when you think about it, right? But it's hard to do. People don't do it. Why do you think people don't do it? Are they of the same mindset that I used to be, that if you're in work, you have to give everything, or they're just not used to it, or what do you think contributes to it?
It's probably the way in which we grew up, the mentality of the society,
Yeah.
the things that we are taught, because our parents had to go through much rougher times where they couldn't afford to play or to, I don't know, do something else because they had to fight to go to work. In my case, it was the grandparents, but anyway, we're coming from those generations.
Mm.
But not now, we have to realize that times changed a little bit and we need to adapt to the new reality. That reality is no longer ours. So if we operate in that, that will affect also our nervous system, and that will reflect into everything that we are doing. And yeah, it's having a big cost.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's more and more people right now are starting to think about working on their identity. This is something like that comes from coaching, at least from for me. I realized this concept of working on my identity when I did my coaching training. um, but I see so much benefit to it, and I think it's starting to spread. Maybe we're not quite there yet, but more and more people are interested in finding out more about themselves, who they really are, why they react in certain ways, how can they change some things, and so on. Expanding, how can they expand? And I think that's a beautiful trend to witness.
Yeah. I love that. And when you say about identity, it's strange because I found that a lot of people, their identity is wrapped up in work a lot, um, and
Yeah.
and with titles, with salaries, with money, with whatever. And I understand that. I really get it, and I'm not sitting here saying that money isn't important, because it is. We all need that. Um, but I think it goes much beyond that, and I think. I've always said that people think that being employed is safe and that there's security. I think that can be an illusion, because I know people that have worked for a long time in a company. They were the best of the best, and you're like, wow, brilliant. And then recently they've been let go of the company, not because they did anything wrong. It's just the company had new management and wanted to change, and now they're in a place where it's like, oh, and it kind of, all the great things that they've done, yeah, it's great, but ultimately someone's going to look at a spreadsheet somewhere, doesn't know you, doesn't know the value, tangible or intangible, that you've brought over the years. Something doesn't add up for them, and they're going to say you're going to go. And I think that can be very difficult for people when their identity is kind of associated with that work. And I think I know we've kind of gone off on a tangent, but it was super helpful for me to have that conversation and understand you a bit better. But I if we bring it back to, you've created something that I know you're not your work, but you've there's many aspects to your work, like you said, the coaching part, there's the business, building something, playground, and that's it feels like it's not your identity. It just feels that you're enjoying it, and that you have then this almost freedom and flexibility side to sort of move and make decisions, and and that discovering who you are, and that feels that feels amazing. And it's not identity, but like you said, you're understanding who you are, and you go, oh, okay, this is how I like to do things. I'm quite structured, but I like to play. I like to be in this from 0 to 1 part of things. And there's millions of companies out there that need someone like you. And I think because you've had um, that ability to reflect on who you are and how you are, you can just sort of say, well, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is where I come alive, this is what I could bring to you. And then it's easier for you to, I don't, and we can talk about clients because it can be quite a scary moment when you're either in between clients or you've got no
Yeah.
clients. Um, but at least I think because you know that, you can explain who you are and people can pick up on those signals. Whereas oftentimes when we're in companies, we're controlled about what our identity can be. Like, you're given a title, and you're either limited to that title, and maybe you want to be more than that. You want to, just be more than whatever your title is, and or you're constantly scared that you're given a title that you don't feel that you can live up to. And I think, like you say, that identity and understanding who you are is almost liberating. That's how I feel. Am I off base with any of that?
No, 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 it's totally true. No, I feel the same. And I think, or there's something I feel that I need to say because I don't want to convey, a wrong idea to the ones listening. What for me is important was that in my situation, I didn't really have the financial pressure. I also have my husband, and he's always had a stable family, like a stable income. So I kind of had this room to be flexible a little bit and to allow myself to have periods in which maybe I didn't have an income or my income was less. It's certainly different for different people, but for me, that was the advantage that I had, and I really took advantage of my situation in a way to have this flexibility to play around a little bit. But I really understand that for other people it can be different.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Again, it's not. I'm not saying that. I think there is this misunderstanding. So again, there are many people out there that will explain, okay, start your own business, and that seems like almost a trend to start your own business. Now, I having been in business, and I'm not even sure about myself whether I should be in business, because um, I think people misunderstand. They go, I'm great at what I do, so I'm going to create a business. Those two things are almost quite separate. You can be an expert at what you do, um, but the mentality and the challenges of creating a business, running a business, um, putting yourself out there, trying to find clients, thinking about the financial aspects, um, those skill sets may be opposing. It's not. They might be one and the same. There might be a nice crossover, etc. But oftentimes it's not. And I see a lot of people now jump from corporate jobs into doing something as almost an escape. But what that causes is actually, it's not. You need a business around it. You need a model. And if you don't enjoy that, or it's heavy lifting, or it's not the answer. And I don't want to scare people, And if people want to try it, absolutely they should try it. And what I liked about your example is that you did both for a period of time, and like you just said, you had the the sort of backup of your husband, which is great. But just jumping out of one to start another. Okay, we always celebrate those success stories, all these founders that have built these amazing things. But they're like unicorns, and there's a certain mindset that goes with that, and we don't always dig into that. We just sort of celebrate the successes, but we don't really lift the covers up to see what went on underneath. And oftentimes there's something driving them that's not always that good. It might feel like it's good, but it's actually some insecurity or something like that. And so I think we live in this world where people are quite upset with the corporate world and not having that freedom and flexibility. So the other option is I'm just going to create my own business, and that might work. But I think there are people out there that they're incentivized to tell you to start your own company. And I don't believe that's for everybody. I feel like most things, like my extremes, there is this beautiful area in between where there's maybe partnerships, or finding a company that does value you as a person, or you can bring all of your skill sets, and that might be an existing company, or you might know people that you create. And that you can't just jump ship and create something out of, well, you can do it, but I think it's worth having dialogues with people and seeing you know um, if there's other partnerships you can sort of join to create a company together. You have a shared vision. I was told a little while ago by one of the guys on the live, he built a company with his wife, and I was like, "Oh, that, like, how does that work?" And he said, "We are very different people. The things that I want to do and the things that she wants to do are completely separate." And he said, "Where I see a lot of businesses fail is that you have two people wanting to do the same job, and it's like, no, 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 because then you both have different ideas for the same job." It's so him and his wife are very complementary, and the way that they come together is such in a beautiful way, because they'll talk and they'll explain, okay, well, I see it from this perspective, and he will say, I see it from this perspective, and they'll find a way forward. And and their goal is generally the same, but the jobs that they actually do are separate, and they get there together. So again, what's your opinion on that? Yeah, is that what you see? Am I again being a bit disillusional? What's your thoughts?
No, I definitely think it's not for everyone. I mean, if the situation allows, people can do some trial and error and see what works and what doesn't work. But if there are more, if they need to be a little bit more cautious, or if they need more stability, I think these things have to be maybe thought about before a little bit, because yeah, I've also taken like mentorships and classes and courses and everything. So not everything works in real life. And it's not sometimes because the method is not good, but maybe the environment, maybe the circumstances, maybe you don't know the right people. There can be many factors that can, influence these things. And yeah, rather than jumping into something, I think it's worth taking time to calculate the cost before, like to think a little bit. Yeah, do I have a backup? What if things don't work out the way I expect? And yeah, there is no guarantee. It's just I think for me, like you were saying, it was just an experiment. I was experimenting with many things, and some were successful, some were less successful. But yeah, you need to have that room and that flexibility to experiment.
Yeah, and as you were saying there, I was thinking about we sort of said designing almost your life around work, but that doesn't mean that you have to create your own company. And I think that work on identity and actually what you want, and I think we're very good at saying what we don't want. I think we
Mm-hmm.
often struggle to say what we do
Mm-hmm.
want. And like you say, it's almost we're running away from something rather than running to. And those things are very different. And I think that work up front of just trying to understand um, what works for you, what you're trying to either get away from or what you're trying to move towards is really helpful. We can always overanalyze, and it can be like paralysis, so you don't make a decision, etc. And I'm an overthinker, um, but I think some amount of time to understand who you are, what you actually want, and be it work, your life, and if you can look at it as a whole, I think that will give you a much deeper perspective and also might start to reveal some options. Maybe it's not that you quit your job. Maybe you just say, look, I want to go part-time or something like that, or I want to switch, or I want to do something. It might be that you go, okay, I've worked at this company, I want to do the same thing, I love it, but I want to go somewhere else. Or and I think your example is amazing because you've said, I want to go from you excel in the place from 0 to 1. I would imagine once you get to 1, that becomes a bit like, oh no, I need the challenge again. And that can be that sometimes people think that's a negative thing, but I think it's very positive because you understand that about yourself and you bring the most amount of value when things want to go from 0 to 1. And so you existing in 1 to wherever, people don't get everything or the as much value from you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely, it's true. It's a very it's a niche, let's say. And yeah, I'm doing my best work here, and then I need, just like you said, I need the challenge. And I think this once at least this is how it is for me. Once you start working with yourself, I think there's probably no end to that. I mean, I'm still figuring things out about myself. I'm still understanding more about my identity and where I want to go. And I don't have everything figured out now. Like, there are still things that I'm learning, but I'm really enjoying also the journey, not just reaching a point, but also these moments when, I have a reflection, realization, things shift. I maybe get a little bit closer to my goal, to my wishes. Yeah, it's a process that I definitely enjoy.
Yeah. I think that's such an important point because I've always had this mindset of when I'm here, then I will feel this way. And I realized the other day, it's so silly, that I'm pretty much living my dream that I wanted, maybe a couple of years ago. I get to have amazing conversations with people. I can do this anywhere that I want. I have the freedom and flexibility to go to the UK. I have the ability to go and pick up my kids. I've designed this. The part that's missing currently is the business, the income side of it. Um, but that you can easily focus on the thing that you haven't got.
Mhm.
Whereas I sat there and I was like, oh, hang on, I've got everything that I want. And that other part will come. 100% it will. And I give it some time, but it shouldn't occupy every thought. And I have to almost pinch myself. I go, yeah, Colin, you're doing the thing that you dreamed about. And when I did, I was like, oh yeah. And I was like, yeah, you should be really grateful for this. And when you're grateful and enjoying that journey, like the worry about money or how it's going to come just doesn't go away. It just becomes a little bit easier because you go, oh, okay. And I feel like this energy, and you go, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, how lucky am I to be able to do this thing that I've almost chased? And it's this weird thing that we often chase something, and then when we're in it, we're so preoccupied by looking up and out that we
Mhm.
forget to just take that moment of reflection. And go, oh yeah, I'm where I want to be, and I think that would be very sad for me because I don't know where it's going to take me. I have no idea. But I'm like, yeah, amazing. Like that's what I wanted. Take a moment, reflect, be happy in what I've achieved, be grateful for the people that show up for me, and enjoy it. And just sit in that moment and enjoy it. That doesn't mean you're complacent, that you don't want to keep going. But yeah, just be happy for where you are.
That's a powerful realization right there. Yeah. And we often forget to do those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
right.
I'm conscious of the time. I think I could talk to you forever. I think it's there's so much enjoyment, there's so much wisdom that you've got, and I love this side of you that is it's very inspiring what you've done and how you've done it. I love the fact that you've discovered a lot about yourself, but you're still working on things and figuring it out, because that seems uh, an amazing thing to have done. But still, you're working out what's going on, what works, is things going to shift, and that discovering part of yourself. And I would imagine it's amazing to work with you because of the way that you understand yourself and the way that you can come in, bring that perspective, and you're very calm, very considered, and you see things from that zoomed out lens, and I think that's fantastic. So, but for today, thank you very much. For those people who want to know more about you, where do they find you? I don't think you're on Upwork anymore. Are you still on there?
I still have a profile, but I'm not very often there. I think LinkedIn is the place to go. I'm not on social media like Facebook, Instagram. LinkedIn is the place to find me.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I repost these anyway. I'll mention you so it's easier for people to find you. It wasn't difficult for me to find you, but yeah. For today, thank you. It was a real pleasure. I've got so many more questions, but obviously conscious of time. But for today, thank you very much. Maybe we do a round two. If people have got comments, they can always send them over. Maybe we do a round two and answer some of those questions that people have.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you very much, Colin. It was a very enjoyable conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Laura. Take care. Yeah.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.